Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. My name is Mary Abajay, and I'd like to welcome you to the Friday 15. This is my weekly live LinkedIn broadcast where we go live for 15 fast, furious, hopefully fabulous minutes in order to talk about career and workplace success. Sometimes that success looks like getting a promotion. So if you're trying to move up the corporate ladder or trying to crack that promotion code, or maybe you're tired of getting passed over for a promotion, then today's episode is for you because today's episode is all about how to get promoted. And because this is the last Friday of the month, it's also a special Cubicle Confidential episode, which means we are going to be joined by the fabulous, the amazing, the venerable Chris DeSantis, who is an organizational consultant, international public speaker, and all around the smartest guy I've ever known. So, Chris, come on up and say hello to everybody.
Hi, Mary. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me again on our Friday 15. I look forward to today's topic.
I know it's going to be fun. So everybody say hello to us. We see we got a couple of comments here. Please share with us your ideas for getting promoted or your frustrations with getting promoted or any questions that you have. And Chris and I will be happy to answer them. Hello, Felicia. Hello, Jose. Hello, Courtney. Hello, Carrie. Oh, and by the way, everybody, Chris, before we start, though, I do have to ask you this. Since Halloween is on Sunday and I'm a huge Halloween geek, what is your favorite candy?
Well, I usually go with I like Snickers. I like the M&Ms. I like Milky Way. I like Three Musketeers. I like all those
Classic
chocolatey,
ones.
creamy. Yeah. The classics. The classics is good.
And everyone here joining us today, let us know what your favorite Halloween candy is. Put it in the chat box. Maybe it's the candy that you steal from your kids' bags, or maybe it's the candy that you withhold and don't give out because you keep for yourself. I'm kind of partial to the Three Musketeers as well. Hello, Felicia. Hello, Colin. All right. So, Chris, we're going to talk about getting promoted. So
Yes.
I think one of the things we want to just start off with saying is that there's lots of ways to get promoted. There's lots of different ways promotions can look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might be a moving into management. It might be a bigger title, a larger paycheck, a new office. So like when you think about getting promoted, how do you want people just to think about it broadly before we get into strategies?
Well, it's a good question because a lot of it is all the context of where you are and what you want to be next.
Yeah.
So I think you have to take that into consideration. I also think we often think that promotion is the right thing to do for us. But I would say before you even commit to that, find out what it is up there that you'll be doing that if you actually like doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the first things people should do when they're thinking about getting promoted is to think about this would be my number one strategy is to think about like what it is that you want. Why do you want to get promoted? What does it look like and why? Right? Because you got to really think through what am I trying to do for my career? Just getting a promotion for promotion's sake isn't going to do anything for you unless it's in alignment with what you are trying to develop for your career. Am I right?
I agree. And I also think you're subject to the herd. Meaning that if everyone's there in the office and they're vying for this, you think you should vie for this because you want to be as relevant as they are. And all of a sudden now we've got an Abilene paradox. Everybody's going after something that maybe nobody wants.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know the Abilene paradox, it's an old paradox, an old parable where it's like everyone is on the bus going to Abilene. Oh, we're going to Abilene. And then you get there and everyone's like, I didn't want to go here. Did you want to go here? I didn't want to go here. I just thought you wanted to go here. Right. So you're very right about the Abilene paradox. All right. So let's say that someone on our broadcast knows what they want and they know why they want it. Give us your three strategies, your top three strategies for getting that promotion.
Well, if you I mean, there's more than three involved with this, but I'll name a few things, but you're going to have some things as well. I think it'll become very useful. First of all, make yourself known as likable, meaning a team player. And you want to be known not only to your boss, but to your boss's colleagues, because they will have influence. It's not just who you know, it's also who knows you. So I think that's and the corollary to that is also not only be likable to your boss, but start doing some of your boss's work, because you want to get familiar with the work you will be doing before doing the work. This way they see some evidence of that already. Another thing I think is very important, which is tied to this, is you want to make sure you can quantify your results, meaning you want to make a business case for yourself. And I don't think you should be shy about sharing that. In fact, we did an episode on our Cubicle Confidential on shameless self-promotion. See, humility doesn't help you if nobody knows you. Once you are known to other people and they know you have a reputation, then humility becomes an asset. But before then, it gets in the way of what you should be saying. And what you should be saying are the facts about you, not the superlatives. The superlatives are, I'm great, I'm wonderful. The facts are, I made the budget. I made us revenue at X percent. Those are the facts. So go with that. And last but not least, I think here is, be competent at what you're doing, but don't necessarily think you have to be the best at what you're doing right now, because if you are the best, you could become indispensable. And indispensable is its own obstacle to your advancement, because I can't replace you. So those are some of the strategies I might suggest to you at this moment. What about you, Mary?
I love those. And, Colin asked, what are some strategies for getting your first leadership position? And I think one of the things that you talked about in one of our Cubicle Confidential podcasts was you have to show how you can add additional value, right? And you had talked about you could either be a bottom line value. What were those value items that you said were really important?
Oh, yeah. That's great. Yeah. That was you can either think about this, make a case for either saving them money,
right,
make a case for making them money, or saving them time, or improving the brand. Those are probably the top four. Now, if you're in the compliance area, it's keeping them out of jail. But those other ones are the key. So think in those terms, and if you have ideas that support that, they're going to be supportive of you.
Yeah, I love that. And Colin, I'd also say if you want your first leadership position, a couple of things in addition to what Chris said is that you're going to have to go above and beyond. Just doing your work and just being, while competency is the start, just being competent and doing what you're supposed to do isn't going to be enough to show that you are capable of leading or being a leadership person. So I think about the people whom I promote in my company. I'm promoting the go-getters. I'm promoting the people that are raising their hand. I'm promoting the people that are taking on the projects no one else wants to take on without complaining about them. I'm going for the people who are really giving me that extra that shows like, ooh, I can be a leader. And also you need, if you want your first leadership position, you also need to do a couple more things. You need to raise your hand. You need to say, I'll do that. I'd like to do that. Like to let people know that you want to be promoted. And you also have to make sure that you are making it easy for people to see you in that role. So part of that is like, as Chris said, networking, building that, but it's like knowing what your brand is, knowing how the other leaders show up. How do they dress? I know that sounds superficial, but it's true. How do they conduct themselves in meetings? How do they communicate? What's the value that they're bringing? So the easier you can make it for others to see you in that leadership role, the easier it is for them to select that leadership role. And then the last strategy I would add to Chris's is, go have a conversation, a career path conversation, but not only with your boss, but with other senior people in the organization. Find out, what it takes to become a leader or a supervisor. Find out what skills or experience that they look for. Part of this is understanding the culture. And Chris, I know you're a big advocate of having people find mentors and advocates and sponsors. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to broaden your scope in terms of this, meaning that you don't need to have just one mentor, but you need to have people that can give you advice. I'm always a fan of going more surgical in the advice you seek versus broad. So the broad approach is, tell me, how can I help you help my career? That's a very broad question, and I don't know what that means. But if you have a surgical question for, I'm working in this situation right now, can you give me some advice on how to handle this particular situation? See, the precision of the request and then the advice you receive, it's easier for me to do that. But otherwise, I'll help you with your career. I don't know what that means as a mentor. Yeah. Now, the other thing is too, because this ties to that, is eventually, and Mary brought this up on another episode, we'll be doing one on mentoring, is this notion of a sponsor. And you want somebody eventually that has skin in the game with you, that says, I'm bringing you along with me, but I expect from you things that'll be done because you are in my camp now and you are my reputation. So a sponsor is what you aspire to, but you don't start there. A sponsor is only given to you as a consequence of your deliverables, meaning the reputation you achieve. And then they start to trust you relative to that. So I think Be surgical, go for small advice. Don't take a lot of their time. Over time, they will come back to you and they will start to check in on with you and say, how's it going? That tells you that this approach is building and they are interested in your future.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of questions that we're going to try. I'm going to combine two. So Felicia asks, but what if your boss doesn't want to share their work with you? And then Victoria asks, how do you overcome a toxic boss so you can get promoted into a different section of the company? All right. So for both of these, one of my suggestions would be sometimes you have to move across to move up. So I would recommend, depending on the size of the company, looking for perhaps a lateral move into a different department or a different team in order to move up. Because a toxic boss, by the way, you want to get out of that toxic situation as soon as possible. And a boss that doesn't want to share their work with you probably isn't the best boss to be an advocate for you either. So in those situations, I would say for both of those, I think your best bet is to move across in order to move up. What say you, Chris?
No, I don't think I can add anything substantial to what you've said, because I really think that's the key. If somebody is not sharing the work, one of two things is happening here. They're insecure about what they're doing, and so they want to hold on to this, and they become a bottleneck, or their boss isn't passing anything on to them, so the whole relay isn't working. Yeah. So you want to get out from under that.
Definitely. Here's from Felicia. Sometimes office politics are in the promotion. Yeah, Felicia, not sometimes, always.
All the time.
Always. There's always some sort of politics, and politics isn't necessarily bad. It just is. So my advice for the politics is to really understand the culture, understand who networks with who, understand who listens to who, understand who influences who. It doesn't mean you have to play the politics, but you do have to understand the underlying currents or dynamics at play in the organization. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think the challenge here, and this might have a gender component to it, is this notion of competency. I have to be 100% competent, and I will be noticed as a consequence of this, and it'll be purely meritocracy, meaning that they'll notice how wonderful I am. And I don't think that's enough. To your point, I think there is always a political component. We will, as a leader, I want to work with people I like. Not just people who are just competent. You see what I'm saying? There's a combination here that you have to take into account. Now, the question becomes, how do I become likable to that leader?
That's right. Yeah, I know. And that sounds so random and sounds so unfair, but you know what's unfair? Life is unfair because there's two games you have to play here. There is the task game, like the competency game, the work game, the getting things accomplished game, but you also have to play the social game. It's kind of like Survivor. You've got to make sure that, as Chris said, one of your very first strategies was to be likable, be part of the team. Again, let people see you in that role. All right.
May I add one more thing on this? Because I just saw this, because I saw this, it's about Mark Cuban. And Mark Cuban is interested in people that reduce his stress. Now, that's interesting. There is no resume that will say, okay, I'm a stress reducer, or there's no evaluation that says capable of stress reduction. So unless you know this about this individual, then you don't know why he's judging you the way he's judging you. So this is part of the politics of the game. It's below the surface of policy.
Yeah, I love this. And when I think about people I promote, half of what it is people that can take stuff off my plate to cause me less stress. And my team, they're so lovely. Courtney, Robin, and Kristen, they literally have meetings without me and they talk about what can you take off Mary's plate. So I love them all. All right, we got a great comment here from Aditya, and I'm sorry, I probably ruined your name. How to overcome a biased leader? Well, Chris, I'm going to toss this one at you first.
Wow. Well, first of all, the term biased means we're all biased. I need some clarification as what is the basis for the bias? Because the basis for the bias determines the strategy for overcoming it. Because they might be biased with somebody who likes to stay late, or they might be biased to somebody who is a person of a few words. So those are all biases, but they can be overcome. So I have to know from you what that means. I think you're implying prejudice, which I think is a problem. And if you're working for a prejudiced leader, I would leave.
Yeah. But I think the key is to understand what their bias is.
Exactly.
And if it's not an unethical bias, or if it's not a bias that, like, if it is like a bias, like bias towards people that come early and stay late, or bias towards people that speak in person, then see what you can to kind of adapt yourself. And you have to completely change. But for example, I have a bias in my team of people who have a sense of humor. So people who are funny tend to do well with me. Whether that's right or wrong, they're people I enjoy working with. So really take a look at that bias and see if there's any way that you can work with that bias in order to get a positive bias on you. But if it's like a negative bias or a gender bias or something that's unethical or prejudicial, then you might want to consider leaving.
But let me make one more point, because if you are different in some category, you have an opportunity to change. This is called contact theory. And so in contact theory, if you go through what's called a crucible experience, a very difficult situation with your boss and your team, and you all come through that together, that contact, all of a sudden that changes their perspective on that which they didn't understand about your difference. Yes. So I would say, give it a shot.
Yeah. So Dina just said that it was a bias towards a few people in the team. So
favorite.
That's oftentimes like favoritism, right? And you got to think about who bosses favor. Bosses may favor different people for different reasons. So that's the first thing I would do, is really figure out what it is about these people that is causing this favorable bias.
We all have favorites.
Yeah, we do. Unfortunately,
the problem with your boss is, you know that he has them.
Yeah. And he or she is clearly bad at hiding them. So if the bias is unovercomable, then you might want to move across to move out. Robert Tate says the fact that you have to play games to get promoted is actually a degradation of the employment system, and being qualified isn't good enough anymore. So yes, Robert, yes. And so yes, of course, it should only be about your merits, but your merits in terms of being a good producer, right? But we also have to remember that the workplace is a social system, and in social system, relationships with people matter. People's interaction matter. Those soft skills matter. And so those things are going to come into play. And it's one of those things where I wouldn't actually call it a degradation. I would call it the reality. And sometimes it can look like a degradation, but sometimes the social system can be beneficial as well, because it makes people workplace engagement. People might leave their organization because of a bad boss, but they stay because of their colleagues. So I think it's a double-edged sword, actually. What do you say about?
Well, I agree with everything you've said, Mary, on that, because Robert, I think what you're talking about here is the employment system. The system is actually tilted badly anyway, because our evaluation systems are opaque and vague. And so the metrics are bad. If we had better metrics, we get rid of some of the ambiguity of the game, because the game would be clearer to all, the rules would be clearer to all. But the rules of the evaluation, the performance evaluation, and the delivery of that, and the comments made, they lack specificity, and that's the challenge. Fix that, and then the game playing reduces.
I agree. Like you take an example like law firms. It's pretty clear when you enter a law firm, part of the game is building relationships with the partners. But at least you know that, right? So you can choose whether or not you want to play that game or not. Mm-hmm. All right. So we've got so many good questions. We're trying to try and get to all of them best we can. All right. Camille says, what would you recommend when the search committee is worried about your age, even though you have shown action that you would be the best fit for the position? Well, you know what, Camille, you are lucky, because Chris DeSantis is actually an expert on generational stuff. So I'm assuming, I could be wrong, Camille, I'm assuming you're young and they're worried about you not being old enough. So we'll just go with that.
Yeah, I think I'll go with that choice. I think this is a challenge, because they do think that there's an expectation of mastery relative to your age. So in that sense, is if your competition appears collectively to be older than you, then there's an assumption here that mastery requires you to reach that plateau. Now, your challenge is then get to the individuals in the search committee and have conversations with them, and go after the objection right away. Say, look, one of my concerns is how I appear to them. I appear youthful. Is what can I do to get past that which I can't control, my appearance? And so if you do them individually, they're going to start to say, well, maybe there's something here, because what you're saying is, I'm going to try to get them to take that off the table.
I love that. And I love that. That's such a great idea. And when you like go in, whether it's an interview or whatever, make sure that you could even lead with, I know I may seem very young for this job, but here's what I've accomplished. And really list, as Chris DeSantis said earlier, how you've added value, how you've added more money in the bottom line, how you've increased the brand, how you've increased awareness. Like you really got to lead with your successes and your success stories. So they forget about how young you are. And yeah, or call Chris and he'll hire you. All right, Jody Hallstrom, who I love and adore, says, "What if this is such a great question for right now? What if office culture biases towards having leadership positions in a particular zip code, even after we've become virtual?" Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that is going to be a huge problem. So, I mean, I think for this one, you're gonna. The sad thing about this is that even though we've been virtual for almost 2 years, people are going to revert right back to the bias, their in presence bias. They're going to revert right. Well, many people will, not everybody. And so your job is to have to overcome that bias by really proving how productive you can be in a remote situation, which is going to take like really concrete data, facts, like what your job is, how you do it remotely, how you're going to compensate for not being in person, how often you're going to be in person. I think this is one of those areas that we're going to see a lot of movement around. What say you, Chris?
Yeah, this is a little tough one because I'm not, this notion, the implication of the notion is if you're not from this area, then you are not somebody we would, you're not in the club, as it were, which I think the problem I have with starting to think that way as an individual is that you might start to believe that's true of who you are. And that's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with you. It's irrelevant to who you are. And if you see that as something that is endemic to that organization, meaning it's not just something that you're thinking might be happening, but rather that you have evidence, you got to get out of that organization.
Yeah. And now's a great time. And we're in the middle of the great reshuffle, the great resignation. There are a lot of companies who are fighting for good talent, like
Yeah.
you, Jody, who are going to be flexible about remote, flexible about hybrid, flexible about where you work and where you live. So if you're working for a company that isn't thinking that way and is willing to lose a great talent like yourself, then guess what? They need to lose a great talent like yourself because your talent can be used elsewhere for organizations or companies that don't have that ridiculous requirement that you be in that zip code. So I say, go fly, girl, go fly.
Exactly.
All right, here's one more. Carl says, "What do you do when you are being held back from promotion because you are too valuable in your current role?" I'm so glad we got this because this is one of Chris DeSantis's biggest mistakes people make. Chris, go.
Well, this is interesting. I think you need to be competent in this role. So one of the things you also need to do is find your replacement. You should be developing those people who will follow in your path. In that sense, that way you give yourself space to move forward. Because what you want to do is minimize the transition. And there will be a transitional period, and there'll be some pain that's experienced. Anticipate what that be, set all that up in advance, and that facilitates your movement. It's such a great problem to have, Carl. Carl, yes,
Carl.
it's such a great problem to have, Carl, that you're that good. You see what I'm saying? That is the problem of choice.
Yeah. But so oftentimes we think, oh, to get promoted, I got to become indispensable. Well, you want to become indispensable to the company, but not to your boss. Because
Yeah.
as Chris said, when you're indispensable to your boss, they're not going to be that excited to move you on. So I think I completely agree with what Chris said. Start grooming someone beneath you to take over. I was just having this conversation with one of my oldest friends, and she's like, I want to get out of my role, but my boss won't let me. I'm like, well, who's your successor? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, start grooming somebody now that could take over for you. Your boss will be much more at ease with letting you go. All right, we've gone way over, but I want to do one more thing before we go, Chris. What should you do if you get passed over for a promotion?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I think the first thing you do is keep a positive attitude because this could be an economic decision. It might have nothing to do with you. It's just the economics of the time doesn't allow us to do this, right? And then another question you have to ask is, where are you? Where are you in this organization? The higher up you are in the organization, the more skin in the game you have. So if you decide that, okay, I'm upset, I want to leave, you leave your mentors, you leave your network, you leave all of those things and all those connections. So if you're lower down in the organization, you have more utility in terms of your exit because you are not as invested in the choice you make. The other thing I would do is spend some personal time developing new skills in the interim. And those new skills should be aligned with something of adding value at that next level that you will eventually attain.
I love it. Yeah. And I completely agree with Chris. I think if you get passed over for promotion, you need to go to the people that passed you over and have a really honest conversation. What do I need to do more of, less of, or differently in order to get that promotion? Like, and Chris said, keep it positive, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep your heart open. You might have a blind spot or it may not have been just the right job for you. All right. So we keep all these questions keep coming. So we're going to keep going just for a few more minutes.
Okay.
Robert says, what if your skills are intimidating to your boss and they are keeping you from getting promoted because they are afraid you will take their job? So this part of this, Robert, might be your story and part of it might be true. But if it is true, so first of all, go check that out. Make sure that really is the case. And if it is the case, then my recommendation is to either move across, to move up, or move out. If you are being blocked and you really believe it's because they are intimidated by you, then you're probably not going to fare that well in that organization or with that boss. So I think you could keep hitting your head against that ceiling, or you could find a new ceiling. What say you, Chris?
Well, I'm with you on this, Mary. And also, Robert, your last question builds to this one. It sounds like part of the reason you are bothered is that this organization you're a part of, not bothered, but in the sense that you're pointing these things out, is this organization has no metrics. It is a political organization. And now you're in a situation where you can actually see that your boss is up there because he played politics well, not because he's particularly competent. Well, the question then becomes, do you want to be further up the food chain in an organization that is purely political and doesn't acknowledge the contributions that you actually can make? I think your talents are not necessarily being used to their full effectiveness.
And again, back to like with Jody, dude, there are so many companies that are just dying for good talent right now. Don't be afraid to make that move. Again, sometimes you have to move across to move up. Sometimes you got to move out to move up. But I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you leave, Robert, leave well. Leave well. Meaning that everyone was great. I love my boss, love all these people. Leave well. Don't do any of this. Well, they were this or that. It won't serve you because it sounds like something that is not who you are. You see what I'm saying? Who you are is you are competence based, and you're looking for opportunities that are competent based that allow you to shine. That's what you talk about in the interviews that you go to, not what happened in the job that you had.
Yeah. And last week I did an episode in the Friday 15 all about how to quit with grace and class. And, we actually also have a Cubicle Confidential podcast on that too. Should I grit or should I quit? And we talk about how to quit well so that you preserve your reputation and your relationships. All right. Well, you guys, look at this. We went way over. I should have known this would be a bigger topic. But this is the Friday 15, which today was the Friday 27. I want to thank Chris DeSantis, my co-host for Cubicle Confidential. Please check out the podcast. It comes out every week on Wednesday. Next week will be more about this. It's going to be how to get promoted. And we look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, everybody have a great work week. And I saw lots of chocolate candy and different kind of candies for Halloween. So happy Halloween. Next week, we'll be talking about mentoring. So please join me then. Have a great weekend. Happy Halloween.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.